According to an analysis of tax data by the University of California at Berkeley, the average American pays 28% of their income in taxes. That is 5% more than the billionaires in this country. And while those numbers may not be surprising to our viewers, it explains why so many Americans are supporting candidates like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, who are putting the working class voter first.
In her book, White Working Class, Overcoming Class Cluelessness in America, Joan Williams, she explains why she says the elite's analysis of the white working class is so misguided. She joins us now via Skype to talk about the book and why she decided to write it. Joan, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks. Delighted to be here.
Absolutely. Joan, I think for any of the viewers who aren't familiar with your work, what is it that liberal elites, as you wrote, don't understand about the white working class?
Well, there's what I call the class culture gap. Whereas in liberal elites, we tend to focus on novelty and developing our human capital to the maximum extent. So we like political issues that express people's ability to express themselves, LGBTQ issues, abortion. We're very concerned about environmental issues because we're concerned about the end of the world. Many in the working class, and this actually includes people of color as well as white people, they're concerned not about the end of the world, but about the end of the month. They're concerned about getting a good, solid, stable job, and the kind that requires you to get up every day on time to work without an attitude, to an often not very fulfilling job. And that's the aspiration. So they're very focused on, not on self-development as we are, but on self-discipline and on the traditional institutions that aid self-discipline, religion, family values. So there's this very, very distinct class culture gap that people on the top kind of look down often on people on the bottom.
You know, there was this, in my view, very dumb debate that played out after 2016 about why the white working class went so strongly for Trump. Was it race or was it economic anxiety? As if those two things are completely separate and unrelated. And I know you had a great piece in Bloomberg talking about this. Could you lay out your view there?
Well, among white people in the U.S., there has been a strategy among elites to set the white working class against the working class of color. This strategy, it's called the Wages of Whiteness, goes back to about 1670. And that's exactly what conservative elites have tried so hard and in some ways so successfully to do right now, in order to deflect attention away from the fact that working class of all colors, as you point out, they're paying more taxes. They've seen the American dream disappear. So the attempt, and Steve Bannon actually has been really open about this. He basically said, as long as we can keep them talking about race and we can talk about economic populism, we got them. And so the strategy should be for progressives to talk about these economic issues and to call out the attempt to set us against each other of a greedy special interests are trying to pit us against each other as Americans. But what all Americans need, white, black, or brown, is a good job, a solid job that's going to yield a solid middle-class standard of living for anyone who works hard, and affordable health care and affordable education, because we all want to do right by our families. That's the kind of message we should be hearing from every single Democratic candidate.
What do you make then of the differences? Well, I've noted quite a bit on this show. There seems to be a big difference between Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. I've noticed that Warren, she will talk a lot about economic populism, but gives quite a bit of lip service to some of the social justice issues, race issues, and impeachment that the professional managerial class, as you call it, are very obsessed with in the news. Is that a mistake on her part if she wants to try and win back some of the working class voters?
Well, all of these candidates, they're trying to thread the needle, as anybody does. They're trying to both get the nomination, for which you have to play to the base, and win the election, for which you have to bring a lot of what Ian Haney-Lopez in his book calls persuadables, 59% of Americans who hold some progressive attitudes, but also some quite conservative attitudes. That, by the way, includes most of the working class. of all colors. And I think that you need to be talking about climate change, for example, and the other issues that mobilize the base and the millennials, who are just furious. They're furious about actually both the end of the world and the end of the month. So you need to appeal to them in order to get the nomination. But you need to do that in a way that's not going to lose the election by losing these crucial voters in these Rust Belt states that delivered the election for Trump. Now, one of the things that's come out recently that is super interesting is that finally, part of these white working class voters are abandoning Trump. White working class women have their support of Trump has fallen 11% recently. But the other thing that you need to do in those Rust Belt states is to mobilize communities of color. And because they didn't vote for Trump, they just often didn't vote last time. And that was also one of the reasons that we lost those crucial 80,000 votes in those Rust Belt states. But what has been found by recent polling is that if you talk about the message that I have been talking about, all Americans, white, black, or brown, what we need are good jobs, good education, affordable health care. And we're not going to let people pit us against each other, because that's what all hardworking Americans want and deserve. That message appeals to people of color. It appeals to whites. It appeals to and it appeals actually to also the activists.
Yeah.
So that is the message we should be hearing again and again and again.
I mean, it's essentially the union values of solidarity that you're speaking to, yes. The traditional Absolutely. Values of the labor movement. I mean, one thing we do look at a lot on this show and that I find really fascinating is even though on certain policy surface levels, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders are similar. They both say they support Medicare for all. They both say they support the Green New Deal. They both situate themselves in the progressive side of the Democratic Party. Their coalitions are dramatically different. So Sagar actually did a piece this week digging into who's giving them money. For Elizabeth Warren, it's professors, it's economists.
Librarians.
It's librarians. For Bernie Sanders, it's servers and truck drivers and Walmart workers and Amazon warehouse workers. Right. Why do you think, even though they have certain similarities in their platforms, they're appealing to such different constituencies?
Well, you know, one of Democrats' traditional problems in reaching voters is that they are very focused on the college-educated elite. And you can see that in Elizabeth Warren. I have a policy for everything. I love her policies for everything. I'm a professor, and that's the way I think. But people who are not professors, they can feel that, although it's not intended this way, they can feel that as condescension. Of like, well, that's not the way I talk. That's not the way I think. You're talking to somebody who's not me. Whereas Bernie has the ability to connect with people in a way that doesn't feel like it's a professor talking at you. And I just, you know, I always think about the difference between the Contract for America, which was very short,
right?
And God bless its a blessed memory, the what was it? The New Deal, that sort of democratic attempt to, which was like,
we can't even remember what it was called. It was like the New Start.
Yeah, it was a New Start. Yeah, that's what it was.
And it was pages and pages and pages long. It's just like, excuse me, you don't know how to talk to people who are not college educated, and 3/4 of Americans aren't. So that's kind of a big problem.
Right.
Such great points. Joan, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Joan.
We
really
follow your
appreciate
research closely. Come back and see us again.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
We'll have more Rising for you after this.